Hello, everyone. Thought I'd jump on live as it has been announced. The deal for Mohammed Kudus has been agreed with West Ham. And this is one that, let's face it, we're all slightly worried might not happen. A deal with West Ham does not happen regularly for Tottenham Hotspur. In fact, I think the last time that Tottenham did a deal with West Ham was for Scott Parker. And how long ago was that? Something in my head wants to say 2011. But certainly a long time ago. West Ham do not want to be selling players to Spurs. And Tottenham have got their man, which is another feather in the cap. You have to say, for Daniel Levy, he doesn't get many feathers in his cap, but he's done this one. Maybe this one we should give to Vinay, seeing as we definitely have not done a deal with West Ham for a very long time indeed. And yet here we are. So the first one to break it was David Ornstein 7 minutes ago. Tottenham Hotspur reached total agreement with West Ham United to sign Mohammed Kudus. Deal for the 24-year-old forward worth in the region of £55 million. Medical scheduled for tomorrow, ahead of the Ghana international joining Spurs on a 6-year contract. So that's the first bit of news. £55 million. How do you feel about £55 million? And it's been interesting, hasn't it? Because all the talk has been about how Spurs have had their bids rejected, which have started with £50 million plus add-ons. Does that mean that Tottenham have gone in there and slapped down £55 million total up front? And when I say up front, I mean it'll still be getting paid as all transfer fees get paid in the modern era over years. But in terms of not bonus payments based on, do you remember? Because there was the meme came out basically earlier this week saying that, the news that then led to a meme saying that Tottenham were offering, £50 million plus bonuses that would only be payable if Tottenham won the Premier League and the Champions League. Well, Tottenham have come up with a deal that West Ham are happy with. And this is what Fabrizio Romano said. He's given it the here we go. Mohammed Kudus to Tottenham. Here we go. Deal in place for £55 million from West Ham. Kudus only wanted Tottenham Hotspur, and he will now sign a 6-year deal. Medical test booked for Kudus in London on Thursday, then all signed as David Ornstein reported. How do you guys feel about it? For me, I think it's exciting that Thomas Frank has someone in that he wants this early in his premiership, in his managerial reign at Tottenham Hotspur. I think in reality, for a player who's proven it in the Premier League, admittedly, and we should not forget this, he didn't have a great season last year, but he did fall out with Julian Lopetegui at the beginning of last season, and he didn't seem to really ever recover. And let's face it, West Ham, arguably nearly as much of a basket case of a club as Spurs last season, although the difference being West Ham did not win the Europa League last season. So we're looking at a player, like I said, proven in the Premier League. I think he got 18 goals, all comps, and some assists the previous season in his first year in the Premier League. He can play either on the left-hand side in the 10 or on the right-hand side, but he's most suited to the right-hand forward role. So some real, well, do you know what? I was going to say some real rotation option with Brennan Johnson, but actually Thomas Frank prefers to play his forwards kind of inside out. He prefers his right footers to play on the left and his left footers to play on the right. So I wonder what's going to happen with Brennan Johnson this year. He was very stuck out on the right with his with chalk on his boots under Ange Postecoglou. He wasn't really allowed to drift inside too much. And now it'll be interesting to see whether we see him on the left some more and the ability to cut inside, because he is a brilliant finisher. Be interesting to see what happens with Brennan Johnson. But with Wilson Odobert, with Matthias Tell, with Mohammed Kudus, you are looking at 3 options there in the forward line, and you can add Brennan Johnson and Son Heung-min to that as well. 5 options there in the forward line, but 3 of whom who have genuine pace and ability to beat a man. Certainly when it comes to Wilson Odobert and Mohammed Kudus. Tell, I think, will remain to be seen, but in terms of how he plays when maybe the club is a little bit more settled. A report, just reading some of the tweets as they come in. Tottenham, yeah, someone's just written, Mitch Fretton. Tottenham paying 5 million more for Kudus than Arsenal are paying for Madueke. There are levels. It was hard for me at first to see whether that was, in reality, was that a dig at Spurs or a dig at Arsenal? I'm not sure. What do you think about Madueke? I'm interested to see whether Madueke is a deal Arsenal will do as well as Eze or instead of. But anyway, Fabrizio Romano has said more. He says, Mohammed Kudus didn't want to negotiate with any other club, only Spurs. Clear intentions as revealed last week, and deal now done as Kudus will become a new Tottenham Hotspur player this week. The Tottenham fan base, all of us, I think, to some degree, have been calling for Tottenham to make a big signing. And we have our man. Now, what excites me about this, amongst other things, is that last season when we bought Dominic Solanke, he only came in at the end of the window. I think he came in a week before the first game of the Premier League season. Now we have a marquee, experienced Premier League signing come in on the 10th of July it'll be. He's there in time for the pre-season with Thomas Frank, the majority of it. He's there in time for them all to fly off to the pre-season tour in South Korea and Asia. And I think it means that we can probably imagine there will be some more Premier League experienced marquee signings to come. And that is what we've all been calling for. And if Spurs get 3 of those, I mean, I think probably it's more likely we'd get 2, but if Spurs could get 3 players who have Premier League experience, who, you know, of the ilk of this signing, kind of 50, 55 million pounds, that kind of level, then that is something that could really genuinely improve us going forward this season under Thomas Frank. And one thing I will say, you've got to think that Ange Postecoglou, if that were to happen, would be absolutely gutted, wouldn't he? He'd be absolutely devastated. So West Ham, I'm just seeing some tweets from West Ham fans here. David Sullivan has just sold one of our better players to a main rival for £30 million less than the release clause in his contract. A huge FU to Mohammed Kudus, but the biggest FU of all goes to the owner of this football club. Get him gone. I mean, another example really of how there aren't that many sets of fans, you know, in the Premier League and at the top level who actually like their owners. There really aren't. I mean, even Liverpool, I say this a bit, but even Liverpool, who have won the Champions League and a couple of league titles, even there's a corner of their fan base who don't like FSG. That should probably have stopped now that they bought Florian Wirtz for £100 million, though. So tell me, guys, in the comments, how do you feel about Mohammed Kudus? Let's discuss him. I'm going to be honest, because I don't want to be, I don't want to be a hypocrite here. Sorry. And if you see me looking to the right, it's because I'm watching. I've got the Lionesses on as well. I'll keep you up to date with that. It's 0-0 against Holland after 15 minutes so far. But I don't want to be a hypocrite, because at the start when we were linked with Kudus, having been linked with Semenyo and Mbeumo, I was a little nervous. And the reason I was nervous is because obviously he had a drop-off last season. He seemed to down tools after he had his falling out with Julian Lopetegui. I spoke to some of my West Ham fan mates, and they were like, we're happy for him to leave now. We need the money to reinvest under Graham Potter, and we'd be happy for him to leave. So on that front, I was a little nervous. However, I've been doing my due diligence. I've been listening to all the podcasts, people who know a lot more about the player than me. And I've got kind of more and more excited as I have. And if this is the club where he feels like he genuinely wants to be, then I think what we have on our hands is an unbelievably exciting player. So the Indigo Auction says, I think it's an all right price in today's market, especially with the figures being thrown around. Yeah, listen, I don't really think you can get, it's very difficult to get Premier League experience at all for less than, for less than £50 million in reality. So, yeah, I think it's probably a fair price. But David Tamburini disagrees, overpriced. Let's not forget that when West Ham bought Kudus from Ajax, they were confident enough in his ability and the likelihood of him doing a great job that they put an £85 million release clause in his contract. So that's what they kind of expected or hoped that his next sale would bring in for them. So Spurs having got him for £30 million less than that, I think is decent, especially if you consider the Premier League club to Premier League club tax that you have to add on. And then especially if you add on then the realistic nature of the rivalry between West Ham and Spurs. Spurs are the last club that West Ham will have wanted to sell Kudus to. And Kudus put them in a difficult position by saying this was the only club he wanted to go to. So on that basis, I don't think it is overpriced. Matteo says, that's the same price as Elanga, so I'd say fair price. That's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I was thinking earlier today, if Tottenham were having trouble getting this Kudus deal over the line because West Ham were being difficult, what would stop Tottenham going to Nottingham Forest and saying, we'll match the price that Newcastle have had agreed for Elanga? Now, that doesn't need to happen now because Spurs have got Kudus for a similar price. The difference but one of the other differences I'd say is Elanga really is quite solely kind of a winger and certainly predominantly on the right, whereas Kudus plays for Ghana in the 10 as well as being able to play on the right, which is, I think, his favoured position on the right, but he's played on the left last season, Kudus. One of the big stories behind Kudus's drop-off is that Jared Bowen is so kind of the main man at West Ham. He was obviously the captain. So he plays on the right, which is his preferred position. But actually, it's Kudus's preferred position as well. And therefore, he wasn't delighted about that. And I think that's why he dropped off. But I think I would say Elanga had a great season last year for Forest in a kind of very one-dimensional way of playing, whereas Kudus strikes me as someone who, of course, if you put Kudus up against a deep block, he can go either way. He doesn't need masses of space in behind a deep block, in behind a defense to run into, whereas Elanga is more that kind of player. So I would say Kudus is a signing I would prefer to make rather than Elanga. Raider 275 says West Ham fans are going to be so mad. Lol, love it. I mean, yeah, listen, I know what you mean. It's weird, isn't it? Because I heard on the View from the Lane podcast earlier today that Danny Kelly, the host, spoke to, I think he said he spoke to Ray Winston, famous West Ham fan, about whether he feels this huge rivalry that a lot of West Ham fans feel towards Tottenham. He was like, no, Tottenham don't even touch the sides for me, because the real rivals of West Ham down the years are Millwall and Charlton. But I think one of the reasons why Spurs have become their big rivals is that Millwall and Charlton have so dropped off. Oh my God, Lauren James has just scored an unbelievable goal for the Lionesses. She's put it right in the top corner, cut in on her left side and into the top right-hand corner. Absolute banger from Lauren James. 1-0 to the Lionesses. Come on, England. But yeah, so it's really the West Ham fans who feel the rivalry with Spurs a lot more than Spurs do. But you know, they give us a lot of crap, don't they, West Ham fans? So yeah, you can get annoyed for that. Prima Italia says too much for Kudus and not a needle mover. Okay, well, listen, one thing I will say is that I am confident that Thomas Frank knows exactly what he wants and trusts what he wants. And also, don't forget, Thomas Frank has the no dickheads policy. So he will have spoken to Kudus, had a chat with him. And I'm sure if Thomas Frank believes that this player is not a dickhead, then it's a good move. I trust Thomas Frank to be able to judge a character, is what I'm saying. Should also, and maybe I should have put this in the title actually, because there were also this afternoon big news coming out of some reputable journalists and publications that Spurs were also interested in Yohan Wissa from Brentford, and that Sky Sports are now saying that Spurs remain interested in Yohan Wissa after having agreed a deal with Mohammed Kudus. So that's not apparently an either-or situation. That could be another Premier League ready goal-scoring forward that Tottenham are looking to bring in. So as I said, 5 minutes ago or so, if Tottenham are able to bring in 3 minimum, but that, in a dream world, minimum 3 properly ready first-team players who have played in the Premier League before, that could make for an incredible summer for this club. VJ says, extremely happy for this, but can't forget when he wanted to fight the entire Spurs team. That's true. We shouldn't forget that when Tottenham absolutely destroyed West Ham last season, Mohammed Kudus got himself sent off just trying to attack all of the Spurs team. He got very frustrated. Let's put this down to a similar situation as we had when we signed Richarlison, which, of course, Richarlison had loads of fights already with Christian Romero, certainly when he was playing for Everton, but maybe also in international football, Brazil against Argentina. And then the Spurs social team did a big thing when he arrived of making them shake hands on camera. So maybe that's a bit of fun that the social team, who are absolutely brilliant at the moment for Tottenham, will be able to do a nice bit of business with. But yes, VJ, thank you for your comment, mate. Appreciate it. Raider also says 55 mil is a good price, in my opinion. Max Harris, thank you for your comments. Says, can't wait for his brace against West Ham away next season. Yeah, I've talked about this before. He has that quite unique celebration, doesn't he, Kudus, where he likes to sit down on like one of the ball boys' seats in front of the crowd. If he did that at the London Stadium, that would be pretty amazing. SSJ says, now Vissa. Yeah. Is it Wissa or Vissa? I think it's Vissa, maybe. I don't know. Anyway. And SSJ also says, 55 is good. Alanga was the same price. Exactly. Cantab says, not a bad deal. The Indigo auction says, I think we still need an out-and-out striker. Now, Indigo, is that instead of Dominic Solanke, are you suggesting? Or are you suggesting in terms of as a potential rotation option with Dominic Solanke? Because for me, I think Solanke is a brilliant, brilliant number 9. His hold-up play is absolutely magnificent. And I think under Thomas Frank, we will find ways to make him so many more chances than we did under Ange Postecoglou, when the way that we went forward and the way we tried to score goals in the most part was very one-dimensional, with players just trying to get to the byline, then cut it back. I think Frank will be keen to get the ball in from deeper all the time, more crosses into the box, more chances made for Solanke. And also, I think he and his coaching team will find ways to develop play so that we bring defenders out from their positions and we're able to therefore slide Solanke through on goal more often. SSJ says, I'm excited for Johnson, honestly. Yeah, I spoke earlier about it'll be interesting to see what happens with Brennan Johnson. I suggest he'll be playing more on the left this season than he was certainly earlier in his Tottenham career, just as Netherlands take a shot over the bar. Listen, Brennan Johnson's confidence will be flying high after he scored the winner in the Europa League final. He saw how much the fans love him now. We've got the chant for him. So I think Johnson his career will go upwards. And I think Thomas Frank, who I believe was interested in Johnson when he was leaving Nottingham Forest for Spurs, I think Brentford tried to get him over there. I think Thomas Frank will be really looking to improve Brennan Johnson as well. And this is what the most exciting thing in a way is about Thomas Frank, is he's an improver of footballers. He's a proper coach in that way. And as long as we're patient with him, because I don't necessarily think with Thomas Frank, I don't think we're going to have the kind of start that Ange Postecoglou had. I think it's going to take time for the players to learn his different styles, his different formations. But if Spurs fans and the club are patient with Thomas Frank, then I think we will see the improvement of players in a similar way to we did with Maurizio Pochettino. And that is incredibly exciting for me. Eddie says, great news, Barnaby. Thanks, Eddie. Appreciate that. Here's one. SPSK Walker. What do you mean Brennan Johnson wasn't allowed to cut in? All his goals were from drifting in. No, I'm talking about when we had the ball. I don't mean him coming in at the back post. I'm talking about when we had the ball and we were in build-up play. Both wingers for Spurs under Big Ange Postecoglou were asked to always have chalk on their boots, stay as wide as they possibly can. And then when it's on the opposite side, so when Sonny had it or when Tell had it, that is when Brennan Johnson is asked to get into the back post, and that is where he scored all of his goals. But I'm talking about when we have the ball, and I think we will have inverted forwards under Thomas Frank certainly a lot more than we did under Ange Postecoglou. So I hope that explains it a little bit. Matteo says, how much money have we got left for signings? The truth is, mate, and thank you for your comment, I don't know. However, what I can say is that I've read reports that Tottenham are looking to spend about £200 million this summer. So we've spent 55 on Kudus, 35 on Matthias Tell. So that's 90 million plus 5 on Kota Takai. So we spent 95. So we've got about another 105 million to spend. However, in with those reports are suggestions that Tottenham are looking to make about 100 million pounds from player sales. So that could be the likes of Richarlison, Bissouma perhaps, maybe Son, although the latest reports are that Son would quite like to stay one more season. We'll wait to see what happens when he comes back. Which I believe will be at the end of this week. So that, if it was the case and we did make 100 million pounds in sales, would mean 300 million to spend, which would mean we'd have another 205 million pounds with which to spend. They're just reports. Obviously, I'm not across Tottenham's finances. I'm not across their budget, but just reading between the lines. But let's see what happens. Nirvana Man. Nirvana man, here we go. Having wide players standing on the sidelines was always a waste of resources, I thought. Just didn't work. Johnson only did damage when he was coming into the box to side foot home or over the bar. Yeah, I mean, listen, that was Ange's way. Got to say, under Big Ange Postecoglou, we scored a lot of goals. It wasn't that we couldn't score goals. It was just that it was a little one-dimensional. Under Thomas Frank, he will be looking to do things in ways that confuse the opposition and that they won't be able to set up easily against and attack easily against. So that is what I think will change. And again, is another reason why we're going to have to be patient with him, because that will take some time. Okay, just some data here. It says only Lamine Yamal won more offensive duels than Mohammed Kudus in the top 7 leagues last season. 95th percentile for successful dribbles, 90th percentile for accurate crosses, 80th percentile for NPX goals and assists. Lamine Yamal had 291. Mohammed Kudus had 261, apparently. One thing that has been leveled at Mohammed Kudus is a bit of a lack of end product at times. Some talk that you'll get a little frustrated that he doesn't pass when he should pass and that he dribbles when he passes when he should dribble. He is still only 24, so that's, he's not in his prime yet. And sometimes, and this is not a purposeful dig on West Ham, but sometimes when you start playing with better players, you start realizing that there are better options as well. So I'm not overly worried about that. Elliot Cooling, thank you so much for your super chat. Really appreciate that, mate. Thank you very, very much. Send a message as well, Elliot, and and I'll definitely read that out. Let's see what else you guys are saying. I mean, in all, I'm just going to tell you, I'm very excited about this signing. I do trust that Thomas Frank will have worked out whether he is the right personality, Mohammed Kudus, for Tottenham Hotspur. And if Thomas Frank likes him, then I like him. Prima Italia has just answered a question I asked earlier, which is whether Arsenal are likely to get Madueke as well as Eze. And he says that Madueke is covered for Saka. Saka can't play every game. But will they still try and get Eze? That's what I'm talking about. Sai's going to go well. Says, we need more. We need more. Yeah, I think we will get more. Andy Ing 135 says, is there a here we go yet? Yes, there is. Fabrizio Romano is given the here we go. Mohammed Kudus will be having his medical at Tottenham Hotspur tomorrow. £55 million. I think it's going to be £55 million plus some add-ons, but let's see whether that comes out. Here, Ad Gaming has said, I'm pretty sure the fee was 55 plus 9 in add-ons. Let's see what happens. Gilbert Town says, Italian and transfer expert Fabrizio Barnaby. Yeah, you can just call me Fabrizio Barnaby from here on in, for sure. Very, very happy to be called that. Although I don't have any real ITKs. I'm not a journalist, certainly not at this stage in my career. And I go off the kind of reputable journalist. And David Ornstein is the man who broke it. And David Ornstein is very, very reputable. Make sure he gets 3 or 4 different sources. I've listened to podcasts where he talks about how he goes about his work. And that's why he's basically got 100% hit rate, Ornstein. He never, ever gives it the big large about a player definitely signing unless he has the full sources, 3 or 4 different sources. Trevor Standing says, has someone found a hammer and smashed Mr. Levy's piggy bank? Well, I think that's probably it. Listen, if we get 3 or 4 of these at 55 million, these kind of players at 55 million, then yeah, we can say that. But actually, if you look at the numbers, since 2019, Spurs have had the 3rd highest net spend in the Premier League. So it's not the fact that we don't spend money. It's that wages are not huge at this point. That's what's really frustrating Spurs fans. However, I think if you imagine Mohammed Kudus joined West Ham from Ajax for, I think, £38 million. So he'd already had one big deal. So I think he will have been on at least 100, if not maybe £125,000 a week at West Ham. So he will have then expected an increase in that. So I think Kudus will probably be at 150 to 175 grand a week. So, that's decent wages. It's up there. So Spurs' biggest wage at the moment is Sonny on 200 grand a week. So it won't be as high as Sonny's, but I think it'll be somewhere on the way there. S. Swain says, not believing till I see it myself. Well, David Ornstein is pretty much, mate, it's It's pretty much seeing the player with the shirt in his hand. It really is. Dennis Young says, at last, a quality signing. Come on, you Spurs. Love it. And then Cantab, a little bit of negativity from Cantab, said, this is our marquee signing. Don't expect any more bigger. Okay. I mean, I can see why you're saying that, but I just have a feeling that there'll be more to come. Obviously, these Johan Visser reports are still going. Interestingly, this afternoon, since this Johan Visser talk has been released across numerous reputable journalists and broadcasters, I've seen Man United fans getting really agitated because they're like, oh, Brentford won't sell Visser and Mbeumo. We need to get this Mbeumo deal done. And wouldn't that be funny if in the end Brentford, they sold Visser instead of Mbeumo, and Mbeumo had to stay, and Man United wouldn't get the player that they've been chasing for like 6 weeks. And it really shows, doesn't it, how stubborn Sir Jim Ratcliffe is trying to be. I made a TikTok kind of a bit taking the piss out of this, but I kind of have to give some props to Jim Ratcliffe here. Man United have had their pants pulled down for years on transfer fees, and he's like, not going to happen anymore. We're going to be stubborn, and Brentford are going to have to realize that Mbeumo only wants to come to Man United. So we're going to see it out and not go up to the number that Brentford are asking for Bryan Mbeumo. So it'll be interesting to see what happens next with that. SSJ says West Ham are not a rival after this, lol. Well, listen, one of the reasons I think West Ham see us as such big rivals is because in the early noughties we took Canute, Defoe. Oh, England just with a header at the back post just over the bar. Unlucky. Great football. The Lioness is playing really well. We took Canute, Defoe and Carrick from West Ham, and West Ham didn't like that. And also it was around the same time, or just a few years later maybe, that Tottenham under Daniel Levy debated trying to buy the Olympic Stadium site to knock down the Olympic Stadium and build a brand new football stadium there. So that wound up the West Ham boardroom as well. So they definitely see us as a rival. But yeah, I don't really see West Ham as a huge rival, although it is obviously always absolutely wonderful to beat them. So let's see, what else are you going to say? Here, Cantab says, oh yeah, Wharton now will be epic. Adam Wharton from Crystal Palace is rumoured to be on Tottenham's list. They do want to get a number 6 in. He's on this. However, what I would say about Adam Wharton is Crystal Palace, it looks very much like after today's news that Lyon have now had their relegation from Ligue 1 in France reversed. They went to the Court of Appeal. It's been reversed. They will be playing in Ligue 1. So that looks very much like their Europa League entry will be accepted. And that, I think, will mean that Crystal Palace will not be in the Europa League next season. Now, will that mean that they are more likely to sell, let's say, Eze and Wharton? I'm not sure. I think Crystal Palace, realistically, don't forget also Gay is looking for a move as well. And Liverpool are interested in Mark Gay. Chance for England? Oh, just wide. I don't know. I don't think Tottenham will be able to bid enough money to Crystal Palace personally for them to be like, okay, we'll sell Wharton when it looks like Eze is going to go and Gay as well. But I could be wrong. But I just don't think that is likely. Elliot, thank you so much for your super chat. 1 second. I will come to it now. Elliot says, keep the updates coming, mate. Love the honest takes. My original question is, who out of the players we've been linked with would you want at CM or CDM? Well, the players I like, Edison Atalanta. I like Adam Wharton. So those two probably at the top. But I have a feeling it's most likely it won't be one of those players. I think probably early on in the preseason and on the tour, Thomas Frank will be looking at the players we have in Archie Gray, Rodrigo Bentancur, and maybe Pat Matassar as well, and asking which of those can play a double pivot. Maybe Yves Bissouma, but there's been a lot of talk of Yves Bissouma being linked with a move to Turkey. So maybe he'll look at those, and then it'll be a bit later in the window that they bring someone in, maybe someone that we haven't really discussed yet, but not really sure at the moment. That's how I feel about it. But thank you, Elliot, for your super chat. Really appreciate that, mate. What else are you guys saying? SSJ says Kudus the Judas. That's pretty good. Martin 8 says, where is this signing being confirmed? It's a deal agreed at the moment. He's going to have his medical tomorrow. David Ornstein and Fabrizio Romano have confirmed that. Fabrizio Romano has given it the here we go. This is a deal that now will happen. Mohammed Kudus is coming to Tottenham Hotspur Football Club. A very, very exciting deal. Fabrizio Romano has just said, actually, Hugo Ekitike keeps attracting interest from Premier League with Newcastle now keen on the striker from Frankfurt. Another good player, Ekitike. So Ren Hook says, superb news for Spurs if true. West Ham fans will be very unhappy with the owners. The Olympic Stadium is still a big factor in why they hate us, in my opinion. Levy pushed them into a disastrous move. Expect protests. Oh, thank you so much for your comment, mate. Yeah, I was just talking about the Olympic Stadium, and I did read out a tweet I saw from some West Ham fans earlier. They're very, very disappointed with this. Although, like I said, I don't think they're disappointed because they think Kudus has been playing well for them recently. I think they've realised that Kudus had his head turned quite a while ago once he had fallen out with Julian Lopetegui at the beginning of last season. But they certainly did not want him sold to Tottenham Hotspur. S. Swain says, if Langer hasn't said anything, then I ain't believing this deal to be done. Not believing in Romano. David Ornstein, mate. David Ornstein. Don't worry. David Ornstein. And JD Designs. Yeah, this is a good point I was talking about earlier. And my first kind of initial worry about him says, it all depends on his attitude. If his attitude is good, or otherwise you're saying the sky is the limit. Yeah, I agree. The sky is the limit. He's that talented. I think Gary Neville in his first season at West Ham picked Mohammed Kudus as his breakthrough signing of the year. So that's how exciting he can be. Mick Snee, and maybe this is a good one to answer based on Elliot, what you were asking in your super chat. Says Mick Snee says Douglas Luiz next, please. Now Douglas Luiz is an interesting one. Obviously, he played so well at Aston Villa in the Premier League in the six that he got a big move to Juventus. However, at Juventus, he's hardly played at all. And one of the main reasons for that is he just was constantly injured. I'm not sure Tottenham should be buying players who have had big injury issues over the past year or so. That's how I feel about Douglas Luiz at the moment. There is no doubt in my mind whatsoever that Douglas Luiz is an excellent player and would be a great addition for Spurs if we could guarantee that he was not going to get injured all the time. But unfortunately, we can't. So that would be my worry. But let me know, guys, if you think on those lines or whether you think it's a risk worth taking. I'm not sure we should be taking risks with big money signings on players who have a disappointing injury record. Scott Pawley says Kudus is all right, but the price is massively overpriced. He's just had a very average season. There is. I can see why you would worry about that. Oh, as the Lionesses just had another one wide. The Lioness is trying to get a lot of balls into the box. And it's causing Holland a lot of problems at the moment. I can see why you'd think that, but he had one great season and one disappointing season. However, the disappointing season, he fell out with the manager at the start of the year. He fell out with Julian Lopetegui and never really dragged it back. And West Ham were a basket case. And then on top of that, as I said earlier, Kudus wanted to play on the right, and he was mostly farmed out to the left because Jared Bowen, their captain, was playing on the right. So there are reasons. But Scott, I can totally understand why you're saying that. I'm not sure if it's massively overpriced though, because even if you look at Kudus as potentially someone who, I think he will get in straight into the first team. But even if you looked at him as somebody who maybe would be a rotation option, you don't get many players at the elite level now, especially signing from another Premier League club for less than 40, 50 million pounds. So on that basis, I cannot agree that it's massively overpriced. I can see that you have an angle, you have an argument for that. But look, I think he'll be motivated and excited to play for Spurs. Be interesting to see what happens. He has undoubtedly an incredibly high ceiling. Michael Tucci, thank you for your comments. Says, I'm certainly not nervous, but excited even. Think his profile fills a void in the squad. Get in. Yes, Michael, I'm with you. Get in. If you can't get excited as Spurs fans when you get a big signing off one of your rivals and a player who, certainly when he's at his best, but always tries to play in the Tottenham way. He's a flair player. He loves to get on the ball. He can beat players either left or right. He's incredibly pacey. He loves to pick the ball up in little pockets, give little 1-2s. And he's also a bit of a physical menace. He's not the tallest, but he's certainly strong. He's one of those players who's got like a big rump. It's very hard to get the ball off. He loves to pick it up on the half turn. He's just a kind of modern Tottenham style footballer. And if you can't get excited about that, when can you? Gilbert Tan says next one is Visser. Yeah, that would be good. All the reports since this deal has been agreed with Kudus is that the Visser move is still something Tottenham are interested in. However, I would also say with the Visser thing, I wonder whether it's another one where Tottenham and Brentford clearly have... Lauren James is in again. Oh, just blocked. Another shot from... Tottenham and Brentford clearly have a good relationship at the moment, and I wonder if it's one where Brentford are trying to use Tottenham once again and their interest or potential interest in Visser to try and get more money out of Manchester United for Mbeumo. That's what I'm wondering on that one, but we'll see. Okay, so Sammy Merkbell at the BBC says this about Mohammed Kudus. At least 6 top clubs inquired about a deal for Mohammed Kudus, but he prioritised a move to Spurs. So, that's something to give us excitement about him in the first place. Alistair Gold, what's he saying here? Okay, somebody asked Alistair Gold. I don't know if you guys know. If you don't watch and listen to Alistair Gold, make sure you follow him on Twitter. But also, Alistair Gold does the Golden Guest Talks Tottenham podcast. Make sure you follow and subscribe to that. Alistair Gold has this kind of myth around him, although it does seem to happen quite a lot, that whenever he goes on holiday or has a day off, Tottenham end up buying a player that day. And Alistair Gold is the beat reporter for football.london. So his job is to report on Tottenham news and breaking news. Well, he was asked yesterday by a Spurs fan, basically hoping that this myth would work. Quick question, Alistair, when is your next day off? And he wrote Wednesday, which of course is today. And of course, Tottenham have got a deal agreed from Mohammed Kudus on the day where Alistair Gold is off. So it continues, or as he wrote in it, or used a meme to write, the infinite time loop. Journey says, or is it Gurney? Sorry, last year, I guess you're saying last year our midfield was so, and our wing options also, we need to fix that, maybe with Mitoma. We got Kudus in. Mitoma has been quite transparent. He wants to stay at Brighton. He seems like quite a loyal player. He's 29 as well, Mitoma. Fantastic winger. Any club who could get Mitoma out of Brighton would immediately have an... Oh, what a goal for the Lionesses. 2-0. 2 absolute stone-cold bangers in this first half for the Lionesses. I can't see which player it was, but the ball broke. It's Stanway. The ball broke from a set piece about 28, 30 yards out. She hits it on the volley through players. Keeper doesn't even see it till it's too late. Bottom left-hand corner. Set piece chipped into the box. I said all day they've been trying to chip balls into the box. Yeah, it comes out about 25, 26 yards out. Unbelievable. 2-0 Lionesses in a game they had to win. And that will be half-time. Brilliant. Sorry to those of you who are not interested in the Lionesses, but after losing to France at the weekend, this was absolutely massive against the Dutch. The Dutch and the English obviously have won the last 2 Euros, and the English and the Dutch both needed a result here. So great first half for the Lionesses. Desert Socrates says, have we got the here we go from Fabrizio Romano yet? Yes, we have. We have indeed. Russell Brooks says 55 million for a player who scored 5 goals and 3 assists last season. Sounds like a Spurs player. Okay, a bit of negativity from Russell there, but I have discussed some of the reasons why I think he had a bit of a disappointing year last year, falling out with Julian Lopetegui, the basket case element of West Ham, and I think realistically he'd had his head turned. My big worry about Kudus is if he had his head turned so easily at West Ham, if he has a great season at Spurs, will he then get his head turned again? But there's no way that Mohammed Kudus, if he does well at Spurs, there's no way in the world that Daniel Levy would then let him go for probably anything less than £90 million. So I think Spurs protected. They've got him on a 6-year contract. So it's only good news as far as I'm concerned. JD McCall says, thrilled Kudus is joining us, but there are still so many possible / likely moves to come. Departure still possible that change the perspective. Yeah, as I was saying earlier, all the talks and rumours I've heard is that Spurs are looking to spend about £200 million of a budget that's already there, and potentially, if they can get £100 million or so in through the door, they would be willing to spend all of that on signings as well. Cantab says same price as Solanke. I think it's a bit cheaper than Dom Solanke, isn't it? But I could be wrong. Hamden says, as I've been discussing, by the way, we're going for Visser too, right? Yes. Lots of reports this afternoon that Spurs are going for Johan Visser from Brentford. Although I have to say, I do think that is less likely. I do think that's less likely. Goose says definitely an upgrade on Richarlison. Look, I love Richarlison. I think he'll always have a place in our hearts for what he did in the final stages of that Europa League, the knockout stages. Absolute workhorse. Richarlison, if he could prove that he can get on the pitch and not be so injury prone, then he offers us as a rotational 9 and as a rotational wide left forward, he offers us a lot. But for the amount we paid for him, the reality is he's just been far too injury prone. And therefore, if we got a bid for Saudi Arabia or for maybe from Everton of maybe 30, 35, in a dream world, 40 million pounds for Rishi, you'd have to take it, wouldn't you? You'd have to take it. That's how I feel about it. S. Swain says, if we get Vista 2 with Kudus, then we'll suffer a lot in January when 4 of our players will leave for the African Cup of Nations. That is a good point. That is a good point. The players who play for their African national teams in the Nations Cup will leave in January. However, I kind of think you can't base your future all on that. You can't. A lot of clubs will suffer from it. And if there's a player on the list that Tottenham Hotspur want, then I don't think you should not sign him because of 1 month. I really don't. That's how I feel about it. That's what having an exciting, young, hungry squad of players all coming up is all about, so that then they can fit in when a player is injured or is unavailable. So I'm not that bothered about that. Prime Italia says, I'd rather have Mbeumo for a little more. We did go for Mbeumo, but he wants to go to Man United because he was a Man United fan when he was a kid, apparently. So that's just not our problem, is it? Nothing we can do about that. Ben Webber, thank you so much for your comment. He should compete nicely with Johnson on the right wing, and the competition should bring on both players. Son and Tell on the left. I wonder where Odebear will get his opportunities, and will Mikey Moore get a loan? Well, Ben, I was talking earlier about this, but maybe you missed it. I think Thomas Frank will want to play more inverted wingers this season, with the right footers playing off the left and the left footers playing off the right, which will certainly suit Matthias Tell really well. Odebear will get opportunities for sure. There will be injuries. He's a young player, and he's shown me enough already in his time at Tottenham Hotspur that he has an incredible future. I'm just going to say Man United have opened talks with Atalanta over Ederson. A price tag of 60 million euros has been set. That's according to 442. Ederson is a player, as I said earlier, who I like. Be interesting to see where he goes. There's a lot of interest in him. Mikey Moore, that'll be an interesting one as well, because he is also a player who likes to play on the left and drift inside. But of course, he's very young and very raw. My personal feeling with Mikey Moore is that he probably needs a bit more time to bulk up for the Premier League. He definitely had the physicality enough for the Europa League. We saw that. He had some great comments, he had some great games in the Europa League for us. But in the Premier League, he just looked a little bit out-muscled a few too many times. And maybe a loan into the Championship or the bottom half of the Premier League would enable him to kind of get used to that and get some more game time. But let's see. Thomas Frank, he hasn't even seen Mikey Moore yet. He hasn't seen him in training. So let's see what happens. Michael Tucci asked, will Frank have a look at Brennan as a striker now? I'd be very surprised. I would be very surprised. If you look at the strikers that Thomas Frank had at Brentford, Ivan Toney, Visser and Mbeumo, they're not very kind of Brennan Johnson-esque players, are they? That's how I feel about that anyway. Dev Soul says Ange would be devastated. He spent 350 million in 2 seasons and got 17th. Listen, I'm not going to go in on Ange. I love Ange Postecoglou. He won us the Europa League. I think at the moment he'll be pretty hurt. I don't think Ange Postecoglou had really been sacked before in his career. He won the Europa League. He got us into the Champions League. He did what his requirements for the season were. He achieved them. And I'm sure that Ange Postecoglou will have felt very strongly that he could turn things around at Spurs. Now, a lot of the Spurs fan base and clearly the Spurs board didn't agree. And I have to say, I was a little, I was happy for Ange to keep his job after we won the Europa League, had he. But also, I'm relieved to know going into next season that I'm not going to watch us, A, have so many injuries all the time, and B, that I'm not going to watch Spurs concede the same goal in pretty much every game I watch. And I'm not going to be seeing Spurs hopefully opened up with just one pass through an absent midfield. And that is where I think just the tactics that worked in Australia and Japan and at Celtic just were basically seen through by a lot of the coaches in the Premier League. So that's how I feel about that. Brian Lamar says, at least now we have a winger who can beat his man. Gurney says, do you think we'll get another 9? Yeah, I think they will look to, especially if Richarlison goes. I think then we'll be looking for getting another 9. Matteo says, let's go. Yeah, the excitement of Spurs winning a of Spurs getting a big signing in. Everybody loves it. Everybody loves it. Trust Cargo says, is this true, Coys? Yes, it is. David Ornstein has given it the big one, as has Fabrizio Romano. The big here we go. Kudus will be a Tottenham player by end of play tomorrow. In fact, I would imagine Kudus is due to be having his medical tomorrow. I imagine that I will be jumping on for another live tomorrow evening when the deal is done and when Tottenham start releasing their social media videos, which I imagine will be tomorrow evening. And we can kind of all talk to each other when that happens. Jason Green, thank you for your comments. It's fantastic deal. Great pace, good feet, firepower. Spurs have been lacking. Visser next, please. Come on, you Spurs. Let's go. Yeah, for those of you who haven't heard, Johan Visser from Brentford is someone that Tottenham are still interested in, despite the fact that we've got this Kudus deal over the line. Gilbert Tan going in very strong, saying Kudus will be the next Mo Salah. Well, I'll tell you what. Tottenham could do, if Tottenham could get a player who improves and surprises as much as Mo Salah did from when he joined Liverpool from Roma, and someone that could grow with Tottenham's young players as they improve over the next few years, that would be absolutely unbelievable. Brian Maguire says, I never thought the deal was going to get done. I'm happy now. Get a central defensive midfielder in. Yeah, I think we know that that's what we're looking for. Trevor Standing says, should have put an £18 million bid in for Bowen. He's class and would transform the right side of the team. I think it's been hard enough to get a player out of West Ham anyway, but to get their captain out of the club, can you imagine? Can you imagine how West Ham fans would feel? I have to say, I think Liverpool are now going to be looking for a wide forward. If Liverpool started sniffing around Jared Bowen, then that's the kind of situation where you could imagine Jared Bowen saying to West Ham, actually, that is a deal I would want to do. That would be interesting. But no, I don't think Bowen would go to Spurs. Bowen is he's married to Danny Dyer's daughter. He is now kind of East London through and through. So it'd be very hard for a team like Spurs to get Jared Bowen out. Cantab says they want 50 million for Visser. No chance. Listen, that's the reality. That is the reality. If you want a player who has scored goals in the Premier League from any Premier League club, you're going to have to pay 50 million. The only difference is Liam Delap obviously went to Chelsea. Because he had a relegation release clause that meant that he could go for £30 million, and Chelsea did well to get in there early. The reason Chelsea were able to get in there early with Liam Delap is because they had the Club World Cup coming up, where they've already made, I think, £80 million, and they sell their hotel to themselves and they sell their women's team to themselves at a massively inflated value. So that is why Chelsea were able to do that and spend so much money early doors. Tottenham will have more money to spend, in my opinion, but it's just going to involve a bit more patience, I think. PKD81, thank you for your comments. Says we need 3 high-profile signings in this window. Levy will give us 1 and expect Frank to work miracles in the league and Champions League simultaneously. Okay, listen, PKD, that's an interesting one. My personal opinion, and I could well be wrong, is that the fact that we've brought in this signing on the 9th of July compared to when we got in Dominic Solanke, which was in the week before the season started last season, means I think there will be more than one kind of Premier League experienced first team ready player coming into Tottenham. That's how I feel, but you could well be right, mate. Let's reconvene at the end of the transfer window and see how we feel about it. Callie, thank you so much. Says Kudus done. Kalimueno or Vlahovic and Hülman or another Destroyer 6 ad, please. Yeah, Hülman has apparently been on the list. Vlahovic is, I think, available for pretty cheap because Juventus are either looking to terminate his contract or get about 15 million for him. I saw some reports that Juventus are in talks with Manchester United about trying to include Dusan Vlahovic as a swap deal with Jadon Sancho. So keep an eye on that one. Vlahovic, I said in my video earlier, when he went to Juventus, he was wanted by most of the big Premier League clubs, and he went to Juventus and he just hasn't quite... He scored goals there, but he hasn't quite ripped it up. But it has coincided with Juventus basically dropping off a cliff, Manchester United style, from being the best team in Italy to being a bit of a basket case. So I don't doubt that there's still a player there in Dusan Vlahovic. But I also don't think Dusan Vlahovic would want to go to a team where he's not guaranteed to be the starting number 9. And I think with Dominic Solanke at Spurs, he just wouldn't be. So let's see. Elliot says, I'm 50-50 on this one. Pricey, but gives us a very different option on Johnson, Kulusevski and Sonny. More comparable to Wilson Odobert, but with better numbers. Anyone agree? Yeah, I think you've pretty much nailed it on the head there, Elliot. Thank you so much for your comment. I don't think he's pricey, though. I don't. I know it's ridiculous to say £55 million isn't a lot. But in this day and age, I would say £55 million is the new £30 million from a couple of years ago. That's the reality. I really do think so in the Premier League these days. And Elliot goes on to say, yeah, we love signing players who've already had beef with the squad. Yeah, and I'm here for it. I think the social media team will have absolute joy with that. I really do. JD Design says, number 6 is the biggest priority now. Paulinho is there on a plate. Signing a defensive midfielder will absolutely revolutionise our season. So Paulinho obviously left Fulham to join Bayern Munich and then hasn't really got much game time out there in Bavaria. So that's why you're saying he's on a plate. I see that. But maybe they're looking for someone a little younger. Maybe they're also waiting for Thomas Frank to see whether Bentancur and, say, Archie Gray or Pat Matasar could play in that double pivot by seeing them in training and seeing whether they have the attributes to play in the style that he wants. Listen, those two number 6s, that double pivot will be far easier for Tottenham players to play this season because they'll have protection. It'll be a lot more akin in reality to how we played in those knockout games in the Europa League, where Tottenham were pretty tight. They were pretty hard to score past. So it's not going to be like the last 2 seasons in the most part under Ange Postecoglou, where there's been one player having to do all the donkey work, all the hod-carrying work on his own and just being bypassed time and time again by the opposition. Thomas Frank will have a double pivot that will be a lot harder to get around. So on that basis, Frank may well look at some of those players Tottenham already have and say, do you know what? We're a lot more blessed in this position than I thought we were. Now, I've mentioned those 3 Tottenham players. I think Basuma quite likely to leave this summer. And on that basis, we will definitely look to replace Basuma. And maybe we would look to replace him with a player of the ilk of an Ederson or a Paulinho. But Paulinho, I think, will have options because he has shown in the Premier League already that he has what it takes. And therefore, maybe Man United will go for him. Maybe some other clubs will go for him. So let's see what happens. But Tottenham do, of course, have the Champions League with which we can, excite and attract players. So, let's see what happens with the number 6 role. Jason Green, thank you for your comments. Says, would love to see Vista join as well. 2 firepower signings, a strong and lethal team. Also need number 6 as well. The thing I like about Vista, again, I'm going to start by saying I think it's unlikely Vista will come, but we are definitely interested. But the thing I really like about him is he runs the channels so hard. He really does. Both him and Mbeumo under Thomas Frank. I remember watching them at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, just ruthlessly running the channels and making the Spurs defenders do so much work in behind. So that is something that could be really exciting if Spurs could get him over the line. One thing with Vista that makes me think it's less likely, he's 28 years old already, not really part of the strategy in terms of Tottenham's long-term transfer ideas under Johan Lange. But that's not to say that I wouldn't want Vista because, 28, he's in his peak and we'd get at least a good 2-3 years out of him, I'm sure. Superstar Levelin says, now that Kudus is in, now left with Cone, now you want Cone Vinter, Mikaladze and Richard Rios and Vissa. Richard Rios has apparently been interesting Manchester United as well, by the way. Just going to read this. Tom Barkley, sorry, this is about Kudus. Tom Barkley says, the signing of Mohammed Kudus is seen as a major bit of business by Thomas Frank, who made signing a new winger his top priority. Yeah, definitely a great bit of business. And of course, Thomas Frank's, in reality, his biggest ever signing by far. No way at Brentford did Thomas Frank have the opportunity to spend £55 million on a player who's already proven it in the Premier League. So a big moment for Thomas Frank, and he'll be relieved, I'm sure, that he has proven that when talking to exciting players as manager of Spurs, he can impress on them how big a role they'll have in the improvement of Tottenham Hotspur next season. Jason C says, we need a creative player. I'm telling you, mate, Mohammed Kudus is unbelievably creative. I think I know what you're saying, though. I think what we definitely do need is more players of the ilk of James Maddison, players who can pick a lock, pick up the ball in tight spaces and slot in through balls for the likes of Kudus, for the likes of Tell, for the likes of Dominic Solanke. Be interesting to see if we try and get one of those this summer. That's the kind of player that Thomas Frank did wonders with at Brentford, in thinking specifically of Mikkel Damsgaard, of course. Dev Sol says, if Visser is 50, then why not pay 55 from Mbeumo? Because Mbeumo wants to go to Manchester United. Tottenham were willing to pay more than Manchester United for Brian Mbeumo, but he said no. He didn't want to go to Tottenham. He wanted to go to Man United. Now, if Man United remain stubborn and refuse to pay the number that Brentford want, and Tottenham do offer that later in the window, maybe Brian Mbeumo's head could be turned then. But from everything I hear, Brian Mbeumo was a Manchester United fan growing up, and that's why he is desperate to go to Old Trafford, which for me is potentially a career ruiner for Brian Mbeumo, because, you know, he's a great player, very exciting, but so many great players have gone to Manchester United in the last 10, 12, 13 years since Alex Ferguson left, and their career has always stalled. I can basically not think of one player who has gone to Man United and improved. The only player who's got close, Bruno Fernandes, and even he nearly left this summer to go to Saudi Arabia. So let's see what happens. Jason Green says, Visser and Solanke, the perfect duo going into the new season. Kudus adding that extra firepower. Spurs are going to be lethal going to the new season. Well, one thing I will say is Spurs were pretty lethal in the last 2 seasons. So it's about being lethal in a way that allows us to be defensively stronger as well. And that is where I think Kudus will add a bit of X factor. Certainly teams playing up against Kudus, they won't just be able to sit back and watch him pass it around, because he will look to get in behind teams. He will look to beat them on their defenders on their left or on their right. And will also, he's got a great shot on him, Mohammed Kudus, as well. Can hit it from either side. So he is a player that has a lot going for him, that's for sure. Yeah, just a lot of people talking about defensive midfielders. Yes, S-Spy Skywalker says Johnson can learn from Kudus. I think that's right. Crooks 1181 says, in Frank, I trust. Gilbert Tan says, Frank is a real Premier League coach. Jason Green says, seeing as Juve want Basuma, why not do a swap deal for Douglas Luiz? Would be a decent signing. Yeah, possibly. But like I said, I think Douglas Luiz injury prone, to say the least. Alejandro says, hey, hell yeah, let's get Luiz or Wharton from Palace. Wharton from Palace would be the one for me, Adam Wharton, that really goes with our transfer strategy. Young, exciting, room to grow, already an England international, but has proven that he can do it in the Premier League already. He was on Tottenham's list when he was at Blackburn, so kind of disappointing. Once again, akin to Eberechi Eze, and quite a few players like that. Morgan Rogers is one as well. Players who we really liked in the Championship, but didn't pull the trigger on, and then waited to see if they'd go to another club and maybe we could get them off that Premier League club, and then the price just goes too high. I fear that Adam Wharton's price will be too high for Spurs this summer, but I would love to be proven wrong. I would really love to be proven wrong. Just seeing if there are any more comments, guys. Callie says, DM Destroyer, strong, not playmaker, even 50 million. Anyway, whatever. I didn't understand that one really. Thank you for your comment, Takudzwa. Daniel Levy should now go for Eze. I think Eze is looking for that Arsenal move, unfortunately. But yeah, let's see what else you guys are saying. I've really appreciated, guys, all of your comments in this live stream. If you're not already, please do subscribe to my channel for daily Tottenham Hotspur transfer news during this window. Daily Tottenham reports and news as well. Very, very exciting day that Tottenham have made a big signing. Sean E.J. Daniels says, very good deal for Spurs and West Ham. Frank getting him in early will help greatly. Interested to hear VDV's response. Yeah, that's Van der Ven, based on the fact that, of course, they had a fight, didn't they, in the Tottenham West Ham game last season. Craig Harry says, Kudus is very aggressive. Great signing. And one more thing, guys, please do give this video a like if you haven't already. The more likes we get on YouTube, the more players suggested videos this will get into. I really appreciate all your support. Elliot Cooling says, keep the updates coming, mate. Who would be your top pick out of the players we've been linked with if we chose a CM/CDM? Yeah, Adam Wharton, like I said, and Ederson. Really like those players. Someone mentioned Paulinho earlier, and certainly that he's a good player as well, who proved it at Fulham. So let's see what happens there. I'm just kind of going through all the rest of the comments. Yeah, listen, guys, I've really appreciated that. So many of you commenting on this live stream. I will be back once again tomorrow afternoon, tomorrow evening, if, as I expect, the Kudus, if Eze got announced as well, that'd be amazing. No, the Kudus deal will be announced, I predict, tomorrow, late afternoon / early evening. And as soon as it does, as long as I'm at home, I will jump on and we'll go through all of the quotes and reports as we see for the first time in about 24 hours time, because his medical is tomorrow. Mohammed Kudus in a Tottenham Hotspur shirt. Tony Tenbarra says, really hope we can sign Ederson. Yeah, he looks like a good player, but from reports I've been hearing in the last hour, Manchester United have open talks with Atalanta over Ederson. So that looks like more likely he will go to Old Trafford. Market Analysis says, first time watching your live stream. Thank you, mate. Do give us a subscribe. Really appreciate that. And then we've got someone here, MKCZ says, congratulations to Tottenham and Tottenham fans. Mohammed Kudus, my world. So some definite excitement over Mohammed Kudus coming to Tottenham Hotspur. All right, guys, listen, thank you so much for being involved in the live stream. It's a good day. And the Lionesses have just scored a third goal from the header, but actually it's been deemed to be offside. But again, as I said during the stream, England just getting endless balls into the box. They're causing so much damage to Holland. Looks like the Lionesses will win this one. They're 2-0 up. But yes, I'll be back in 24 hours' time, if not before, after Mohammed Kudus has his medical tomorrow and signs on officially, and we see him in a Spurs shirt. Come on, you Spurs, on a great day. Cheers.